What is up?
Hey, um, hey, folks. So if you're just joining, I have an amazing guest. It's Andre, the artist known as RAC.
Thanks for
So
having me. Stoked to be
yeah,
here. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, super cool for you to join. I mean, um, I'd love to kind of like just hear your story of how you got into crypto and like computer science and programming. Um,
Yeah, for sure. So, I guess I've always been into computers, like even as a kid. It's funny because back in, I mean, I don't know what year it was, late '90s maybe, where I like begged and begged my parents for a PlayStation, and and they were like, "No, no, here's a PC instead." And I'm like, "I don't want a PC. Like, I want a PlayStation." And this is back in the day when PCs really weren't like they were gaming machines, but not really. It was like a different type of game. Anyway, so I was like pretty annoyed that I got this PC, but the more I get into it, I realized like, oh, I can like kind of take this apart and figure out how it works and install new parts and buy better parts. It's like sort of like always like a work in progress type of a thing. So that got me hooked on it. And also just getting into music, they were very much connected. It's music production and computers kind of go hand in hand. They tend to be pretty technical. So I was just interested in computers from an early age. I started installing Linux and
what was your distro?
actually like I think my first was Red Hat, and then I got into, just because that was like the kind of the most prominent one at the time, and then I got into more of like Slackware, so a little more difficult
Nice.
for like a 13-year-old like messing around with computers. But then I started to build like these little kind of standalone boxes, like my own email server and stuff. I never really got it to work properly, but it was really fun messing around with my home network, because the place I lived in at the time, my parents' house, actually had like Ethernet through the walls. So that was like pretty fun, just to like not even connected to the internet, just like a local kind of networking setup. Started playing with that, and yeah, that was sort of just like a very introduction to computers in general, and from there I kind of had a many years where I switched to Mac, and then kind of went back to PCs and went back and forth over the years. But I've always been interested in computers, and I have probably too many computers in my house and servers and a home lab and running kind of crazy setups. But it's like just like a fun hobby for me, and like setting up different subnets for my Wi-Fi, so when people come over, they don't have access to my LAN, like trust nobody type of thing. Honeypot SSH servers, I don't know, like just anything to just kind of mess with people. But anyway, so I've always been into computers, and I will get to crypto, I swear. But because of that, I've always been pretty close to seeing like things advance over time. Whether that was like Napster or the early internet. I was in IRC chat rooms a lot. That's where I learned a lot of like early music production stuff, and just kind of networking online. Because I again, for context, I lived in Portugal, which was kind of a different spot. I was somewhat isolated, and it was a great way to connect with all kinds of different people and see how I don't know, kind of learn how things are done. So fast forward many years, after seeing the rise of BitTorrent and all this stuff, I had sort of like, I think, loosely heard about Bitcoin. I think like most people, I'm not one of those people that are like, oh yeah, I read the white paper. It's like, no, I didn't read the white paper. Like, I heard about it on some article, some clickbait article like everybody else. And at the time it was like, you just heard about the Silk Road, and like, I think part of me was kind of like, oh, that's cool. Like a place, like sort of a free port for the internet, obviously with some negative stuff too, but this idea of sort of like, I've always liked this sort of nature of the internet, that it's a little bit outside of control, and like we're kind of a little bit rebellious, and I would again, definitely not like a hacker or anything like that, but I would download issues of 2600 in like text format or whatever, and pretend like I knew what they were talking about.
Did you get the DMCA whatever decoder shirt with the?
No, I'm not that deep into it, but it was like. Anyway, like it was just kind of like a fun. I was at best a script kiddie, basically. You know, I would write my own IRC scripts and things like that. Anyway, I'm just trying to paint a nerdy picture. Like I wasn't super knowledgeable, but I had fun with it. And then, you know, around, I think, you know, 2013, maybe I first heard about it, you know, through a clickbait article or something. And then in 2016 was when I really started to, like, okay, let me look into this and see what this is about. I think I'd also at the same time started investing in other things, so it seemed like a natural thing to look into. And when I actually started to dig into it, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. They sort of solve like digital scarcity in a really interesting way, and you know, it was just kind of like, it's like, oh, this is actually much more than what I thought it was. Like, this is like peer-to-peer. You know, I had sort of seen the power of BitTorrent, and you know, that was, it's kind of like the same idea as BitTorrent, but with like a system of value exchange attached to it. So I was like, that kind of solved the economic side of it, because BitTorrent, you sort of had to expect people to participate in it out of the goodness of their hearts, you know?
Yep.
So it was kind of a very interesting like technology, but sort of held back by that. So anyway, I saw BitTorrent or Bitcoin as sort of a natural progression in that, even though they're completely different technologies, but idealistically similar. And around the same time, I think I stumbled on a video of Vitalik Buterin talking about Ethereum, and that's when you know, light bulbs really kind of went off, and I was like, oh, you can apply this to anything. Like, this is generalized. You know, I was like super fascinated by it, and I became obsessed with it. I watched every single video I could. I watched every single DEF CON video. Like, I became kind of like you know, really sucked into it, but my first reaction to it is like, oh, this can solve so many issues in the music industry. Not like the currency aspect of it. I always felt like that was kind of like a use case, but not the use case, you know. But sort of the piping of the music industry could be built on this system, which means that it's open source in that way, where it's no single party can control it, and it's sort of shared by everybody, you know. Basically a level playing field. Like, that was the idea, and I just thought that was amazing. It was like, this is going to change the world. Like, everything's going to be better. And then I quickly started working with it. It was like, oh, we are so early. Like, yeah, this is just starting. There are some real problems. Again, nothing that seemed impossible or you know, but it was like, oh, this is like very early days. So I got hooked up with a bunch of people in the Ethereum world, at Consensus. Joe Lubin and all that, like one of the co-founders of Ethereum, like he had this project called Ujo that was part of Consensus, and then I really started working with those guys, and that's where I kind of like dabbled in my first project on Ethereum, basically releasing my second album at the time through you know, through basically a smart contract. So it's like, if you deposit X amount of ETH, you get an IPFS link in return, you know, basically. So pretty simple stuff, but awesome. But like ideologically it was sound, because it's like direct to fan, you know. There's you know, network fees. That's it. So to me it was more symbolic. It was more like it was a talking point, something to sort of explain. It was a jumping off point where I could explain some of the issues of the music industry, I guess, if that makes sense. Okay, that was a roundabout awesome way of getting there, but that was my first introduction into this whole world.
I kind of like, when I first kind of heard of NFTs, I was a bit dismissive, but then I kind of like hit me that this is like software eating copyright law, and like that whole like part of like how art and music is distributed is like, can be done like with NFTs. And I think my realization like came after I started thinking that this was actually totally different discussion about like data and like where data comes from. Like if we forget about all the old data, all the old music, but new music that's issued has like attached NFT to it, I think it just kind of like will be like a shelling point for like, oh, if I have the first NFT that has a pointer to this like song, I hold the copyright to it. It's obvious, right? Like, how
Yeah,
do
yeah,
you, yeah, it like you don't even need to like write it into law, right? It just I think will become that like simply from usage.
It's sort of self-reinforcing. You're able to like program the terms yourself into the actual thing itself. The way that I think about NFTs is more like a container. It's sort of a container of any data you want, really. It's a way to sort of make it scarce, and maybe that's artificially scarce, but it sort of flies in the face of like what we currently have, which is so much. How should I put it? Like just everything's infinite. There's infinite copies of everything, and I think we've proven that model doesn't work. Like for certain things. And I don't think for example, like the ad model or anything like that really works for music and for art, because it's just it can't really work at that scale or something. So this idea of introducing kind of a real world analog to it, which is like artificial scarcity, I think is an interesting experiment, where the data itself is technically, you can copy it infinitely, but there's sort of this intangible ownership that may be tangible through like a royalty share or something like that. Yeah. But I'd actually maybe even go as far as to argue that just ownership for the sake of ownership could be valuable as well, right? Which is pretty interesting, because it kind of flips the entire model. So where it's like maybe you can have something that is just freely available, but somebody could own it, and maybe that would be valuable, and that's how you capture some of the value. Anyway, there's so many ways you can kind of take this argument, but it's super interesting stuff, right? Like,
yeah, I've always like thought of Bitcoin and proof of work as like a monument that people like chiseled out of entropy. Like all this energy that's put into this, it's like equivalent of somebody like carving a mountain into like a piece of art, right? Like those zeros that add up to like to that like magic number, I think are like this mathematical thing that's like takes a big pile of electrons to find, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting way of thinking about it, because it does, obviously the power consumption, if you think about it from that perspective, maybe that is like a good bridge for people to start to value digital items, because it's not really, I think we've proven at this point, it's not really necessary. Maybe necessary as the first one,
Do you have like I mean, do you think that like you need proof of work, or like do you have an opinion on that, or like is that like a thing that you're like a religion that you hold? Like
no. I'm definitely not religious about it. I mean, like when I was getting into this stuff, and by the way, like I mined quite a bit, like not Bitcoin, but I mined like a whole bunch of other garbage that is not worth anything now. But no, I don't think proof of work is necessary now. I think it'll continue to exist in the form of for Bitcoin. I think it'll like be pervasive, but I don't think it's necessary. I think we sort of gotten over that hump of again, I'm not an economist, but this is just my opinion. Like that you can create value through belief in that system, and it doesn't require the expenditure of energy to prove the security of that system. If enough people believe in the security of the system and it's obviously secure, then I think that should be enough. But like again, like maybe as a first, it makes sense that it would be. This is kind of like tangible things, like no, we're spending energy, like but it's also had like a really interesting impact where it's sort of or people are trying to use like excess energy from like dams or like other resources that usually the energy actually got wasted. So it's kind of interesting to see the kind of the mining world head to that, I guess, kind of improve its efficiency, I guess.
Yeah. I think like I agree with you that it had like the first one was probably needed to be that, and then like I think like the to me like the weird missing piece was just people didn't know how to use cryptography. Like literally like my job at Qualcomm, it took like a bajillion meetings for them to sign a piece of code, and that could happen once every 6 months. And like Binance signs a million things per day. Like
Right.
it's just like the learning and the knowledge of how to do this just wasn't there. But like, do you think like the NFT side, like the kind of the audio, like artists, angle there with like smart contracts, is that more like replicating the financial contracts between like artists and labels, or is it like how like to me that part is obvious, right? You can like write an NFT that's got like revenue share and people can transfer it and hoard them, right? They can
Right. Yeah.
But like, is there something more there that is more like, I don't know, artist facing, or like, I don't know, like one favorite thing of mine was that like Trent Reznor releases like mini discs of his samples, so you could just kind of like
Nice.
play around with. Like
that's the thing, is like this format, it can be anything. Like I could include all session files, all stems, every single little bit of, I could sort of I mean, this is more just like abstract thinking, but like I could basically put the entire file and everything surrounding it, the artwork, the music video, everything in this sort of container format, and like mint that as an NFT, for example, or and it sort of changes its application. So like if you own the NFT, maybe you load it into like a music player and then you listen to the music, or maybe you load it into like a music program and you're able to actually open up the whole file. And it's sort of this idea of unifying the whole package basically into one thing, I think is really interesting. The NFT space is like, I feel like it's like another thing, like I was talking about earlier. I was like, it's so early that we haven't really even defined it, right? It's so kind of open-ended. So I love this idea of incorporating the contract like into the NFT itself. And I'd actually go a step further in integrating the actual market for it. So like if you have like each NFT that has like the unified market within it, so like all these other platforms could sort of like tie into it and share that liquidity pool or whatever, if you want to think about it that way. I think that's a pretty interesting way of sort of reversing the role versus like having, oh, we're only selling it on this platform or that platform. So you can have it in multiple places and people and platforms compete over, curation perhaps, or like something like that. So it's so open-ended, I guess. Like it's just really interesting to see where this can go. Like to answer your question about like where it goes with music, like I think the first experiment is really artificial scarcity, because up until like 2001, we kind of had some form of scarcity through vinyl, or through cassettes, or I mean CDs were easy to mass produce, but to some extent you still had a little bit of a cost. You didn't make infinite copies,
Yep.
So now that we've made music more accessible than ever, and it's like a golden age for the consumer, the financial side of it on the back end is just not feasible. So it's sort of like it's been priced infinitely, or as if it's supposed to be priced for 6 billion people, when reality, like it's never gonna get to that. So anyway, throwing around a lot of ideas, but basically, like I can see this. Just becoming like a standardized format for music files to some degree. I don't think we'll get there overnight, but like over time, I would like to be able to upload an NFT that's sort of like a finalized thing that anybody can access and trade and do whatever they want with. and that's sort of the release process.
That would be like when I kind of first talked to Ranil and Audius, like I thought it'd be awesome if I could, like load up a tracker and just pull a bunch of stuff together and mix it up and then post that, and then that's like a derivative work of art. You can't do that really, right?
Right.
Yeah. But like it could automatically flow all the financials and like kind of like attribution to users and to like the people doing the stuff. And I think the ownership part is pretty interesting to like the fans, because like anyone that's deriving those works automatically kind of has access to that fan base, right? It's not like exclusionary. Like
the derivatives work is very interesting because like obviously that's been a big part of my career, or something I've definitely focused on. But I think it would be really interesting for like the artists to basically add in a clause or something like that into the smart contract where it's like, if you make a derivative work of this, you can get up to like 10% or 20%, whatever it is, like that, it's arbitrary, of any preceding sale. So it's like, I think that's kind of interesting where we sort of allow for this permissionless remixing, as long as it, as long as I think everybody's happy, as long as there's like income being generated, and if somebody wants to recreate the song in an interesting way and people see value in that, it should kind of accrue back to the, center, I guess. That's how I'm thinking about it.
Are you are you getting like fans that are into crypto just coming from you, like how they got into crypto just through you directly?
Yeah, it's been really interesting. So I just launched this token thing, and that's been a learning experience, because I mean, we knew that we were primarily giving it to non-crypto people. But I still think this idea of owning a token and participating in something still makes sense inherently to people. It's not like, that's not such a foreign concept, but the actual process of getting stuff into your MetaMask and then, going through that whole song and dance is like kind of a learning experience.
Still early days.
It still is. I feel like once you're in it, it's not too bad, but it's that first step. We noticed this in 2017. It was like, I think I kind of joked about it and said it was like 36 steps, to get wire money into Coinbase, then buy Ether, and then transfer to whatever, and and do this and that, and then finally interact with the contracts. But it's it's come a long ways, but it's still kind of a learning experience. Although I felt very supported by the crypto community at large. I'm coming at it from more of a perspective, like I want to experiment with this stuff. I want to try different things. Some of it may fail or whatever, but it's not, the point isn't like to make a bunch of money, whatever. The point is actually to just push these ideas forward and like try different things and learn from them, and so maybe the next person that tries it doesn't make the same mistake or something. And I've already, I think, avoided a lot of mistakes that were made by people that tried different things before me. So it's all kind of part of the process, I think.
Yeah. I think like the experimentation side but this stuff is like fairly like risk-free for the most part, unless you like launch a token with like with a bad contract that people just ignore and buy. Outside of like the horrible bugs that we see, like I think it's fairly risk-free, and like I think it's fun. Like this is cool. Like
it is. It's so cool. Like to me, like this is like the coolest thing ever. And I think we're still going through kind of a learning phase where everybody still calls them cryptocurrencies. I'm like, okay, that's fine. That is one application of it, but that's just one tiny little thing that you can do with this. Like this is so much more. This is like open source with some teeth. This is it's like a new form of organizing. It's like it's so many different things all at once, and it's chaotic, but it's so me experimenting with this, to your point, is like, what's the downside? People won't notice, and not think about it, okay. Like, I don't care, it's fine. I'd rather fail than than not do it. So to me, this stuff is super obvious. Like, you just gotta try it and see what happens. And there's some advantages to being first mover too. So why not?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's still I remember I used to build Gentoo systems. That was
nice.
my distro. And there were people that would spend their free time trying to rewrite NVIDIA drivers. They would who are these people? Right. It's awesome that you would be that involved into a hobby that you would just kind of try to do something super hard and accomplish it. It still feels like that a bit with crypto. It's definitely a ton of hard work.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because you get those people that are sort of just passionate about a problem, but then you add this sort of maybe a mechanism of some sort of earning something from it. It's now you potentially have the option of owning a piece of the infrastructure of the internet. This is deep stuff. I mean, imagining, not to say this would be a good thing, but imagining owning a piece of HTTPS or some part of that mechanism, even if it's a governance thing. I don't know. It sort of goes beyond any kind of thing that we really have. We can't really compare it to many things. And just that the way that it connects people and sort of aligns people in working on a project is just super interesting. And I mean, I think we're starting to see people that are able to make a full-time living from just working on various crypto projects. I mean, I think that's pretty awesome, right?
Yeah, that's really cool. There's I heard this theory that the simulation would likely train itself on the data that led up to the simulation.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And the systems we're building are persistent data storage systems.
Yeah, we're kind of setting ourselves up, aren't we? Yeah. This is just this is the algorithm and an adversarial algorithm figuring out if there's any failure points, if we fail to achieve, we're just one of the many simulations trying to make it happen until we find the right one that does, or maybe I don't
know. Every permutation of every consensus algorithm, right, to see which one.
Right. We're kind of seeing it play out. Yeah. Oh my God, I hadn't thought about that, but now I just got existential. But
I thought out of this DeFi boom, one of the coolest things was this governance side, because I think I remember when Facebook took off, and they kind of nailed their growth strategy, the boring stuff that's super lame about them. They were really good at it. And now we have this $1 trillion company that nobody in the 90s predicted would be a thing. There were 6 degrees and you kind of poke around the internet, and then I think governance tokens have this kind of, I think, potential. If you can get 100 million people organized around this automatic weird voting decision making thing, that's kind of absurd, absurdly powerful.
Yeah, it's it scales at a different pace, right? Because obviously there's all kinds of issues. We can see that our large governance pretty real today, I guess. Our large governance systems, are slow and clunky, and I don't think blockchain really immediately fixes all of that or anything like that. But I think it's still kind of at that first phase. We're still just thinking about it and figuring out. In 2017, it was our idea was governance was give me all your money now and I'll swear I'll do something later. It's no vesting, no anything, things that were sort of taken for granted in the traditional VC world. They're just thrown out the window. It's we can raise $50 million. Sure. Why not? So now I think this time around people are a little more grown up about it. Now there's more robust governance systems that are decentralized and like all that, and we're starting to see problems with that. Like for example, with MakerDAO, somebody used like a flash loan to pass a vote. It's like, oh, okay, all right, we're doing that now. I think
that was a bug in the Maker contract.
Was it? Yeah.
I mean, do you need to write like? I mean, this is like the crazy thing about designing these systems is like every market you create that values tokens needs to defend against flash loans.
Right.
So.
It's yeah. The flash loans are fascinating. When you, because I guess it's not infinite liquidity, but it's, I guess with the new yeah, the mint one, that one can get interesting real quick. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. But this idea of basically borrowing, hundreds of, maybe not hundreds of millions of dollars, but like, $10 to $15 million in an instant and paying it back in the same transaction is like opens a whole another side of this that is super fascinating.
I always thought of it as like garbage collection for like information. like the fact that you can make money with this instant thing means that there's like kind of garbage state, right, that needs to be removed from the system.
Yeah, it's sort of like a dream scenario for anybody that does arbitrage trading. Like,
right.
I mean, you're not held back by your own funds. If you find an edge in a market, you can tap into it immediately for free. Well, not for free, but for like a small fee. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Exchanges will, like, if you're plugged into an exchange, that will give you liquidity if you can like pay it back right away. So like everything else, I think the space kind of like disintermediates all these people and like gives us access to everybody now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, I've like, again, I'm not really coming from a financial background, but I had so much fun this summer with DeFi, and it feels like we've kind of leveled off at this point. But it got wild there for a bit. It was like it was kind of intense, and it was interesting because it was like a different type of person. Like even the 2017 crypto crowd was like, wait, what? I was like, what is this? So I found it fascinating. I felt like it was more insular. It was less like kind of retail investor types and more just kind of tinkerers and a little bit of hackers and just, I mean, in the broader sense, just like trying to play with this stuff. But like, yeah, it's like every new project, it was debating whether you risk any amount of funds going into some unaudited contract just to get like a little bit of an edge on somebody. Like I can't recommend it, but if you don't mind a little risk, it can be pretty fun.
I'm amazed how like there's like kind of social norms that are like haven't been broken. Like the mining pools themselves don't do any of this. Like it seems like they like let people like they don't try to order transactions in the mining pool. They don't like mess with like the status quo. Just kind of cool, right? Like there's like these hidden social like pressures on like what typically people like try to analyze are like, you need super majority for the system to be like honest, but like there's like weird points how that pressure is applied.
And it's interesting to see these projects sort of evolve over time and like fall into these like levels of balance, right, of accountability, where all the game theory you study you can't predict all of this stuff. So it's interesting. The stuff that I found really fascinating reading about was the mempool stuff, like the of like trying to front run transactions or back run transactions. When you there was one specific one with Compound, I think, where they saw that the Compound transaction that was going to initiate a something that needed to be I'm like spacing out on the term right now, but one of the loans was going to be delinquent basically, and they had and that transaction was going out, and they were trying to there's all these like, competing algorithms to try to time the next one just to get the reward. So this is all happening and nobody's really aware of it. And you just send your transaction, you don't even care about it. But like all this, these giant battles are being fought, like but beneath it and under a different layer. I don't know. I find it fascinating. It's super interesting.
Yeah, this is like kind of like those early days, like 2600 days, where people like the adoption of the internet was like in still like hacker land, but it was kind of, people were aware of it at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's what made it interesting to the hackers, because you now like kind of have normal people using this, but you kind of have a superpower. You like understand the tech, right? Like
yeah.
You have the yellow book, right? On the
I used to have this it was this like I had a couple of applications that again, this is the dial-up days, where basically you could flood somebody's network, because again with an IRC, like you could see everybody's IP address. So you could basically like knock somebody offline if they were being annoying or something like that. You're just like flooding their network, or if you had a couple friends, you could time it so like to definitely make sure they couldn't get back online. Anyways, like it was sort of this like combative. People would send like Trojans to each other and like try to, I don't know. It's like I just wrote this little application. Check it out. Yeah. It's like backdoor access.
Isn't that way cooler than like asking the mods to ban somebody?
Yeah. It was way more fun, to be honest. But I mean, obviously that doesn't scale, But it was just this. I think that the point maybe we're trying to make is like this feels like that time, right? This feels like still early days, where there's everything. There's scams, there's like shit projects, but there's also like amazing, groundbreaking stuff all at the same time. And you have to kind of like sift through it and figure it out. And you're sort of responsible for your own decisions. And you have to, if you jump into like an unaudited contract that André Allen like posted, maybe if you lost some funds, maybe you had it coming. You know what I mean? Take responsibility for it. So anyway, it's just it kind of changes a lot of sort of it changes a lot of things about the internet in a really positive way. And I'm just like stoked to kind of be along for the ride. And
Yeah, same here, honestly. Like I think it's just like I kind of got infected. Like I felt like my brain was infected with the idea of like building this stuff, and I can't imagine what else I'd be working on.
Yeah.
Point.
Yeah, I know. It's like I feel like a lot of people will have that experience. It's like when they first, it's like when you sort of see the potential of it, it's hard to look at anything else really, because it's just that kind of, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's just that big of a deal. And I would be so surprised if this didn't amount to anything. Like I just, maybe I have this sort of like blind faith that it will succeed, but in some form or another, I feel like these ideas will permeate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I kind of think we're past that point of like questioning that. It's almost like the boring stuff, like copyright law, is like actually like probably going to succeed as well. Like, are you like, do you see like other artists like kind of be interested in this space? Like, is it kind of growing?
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a good amount of people that are into this. It's kind of funny because a lot of them aren't very open about it. I think maybe because it bleeds a little bit into investing and like that. It's a different world. Like you don't see musicians talking about stock picks or or buying Apple calls or whatever. It's so, but. Like there's actually like a pretty good amount of people that are into this stuff, just from that perspective of making a little bit of money on the side. But there is like a small subset of people that I think see the potential on like beyond that, and so there are a growing number of people that are into this. What I will say is a lot of people tend to pay attention when there's money being made, and like that I noticed specifically with the NFT stuff recently. Just for context, I sold my first NFT as like a collaboration with an artist friend of mine, and it broke the record on Super Rare, which is like one of the platforms, and it was a decent amount of money, and like it basically made as much as like I think probably like 6 or 7 million plays. So it's sort of like 6 or 7 million plays, which is very hard to do.
Yeah.
And then you have like one NFT. So and I get a 10% royalty for life, so a lot of people kind of perked up. We're like, oh, what do you mean I don't have to like fight over pennies with Spotify? I can do this other thing that's more, more akin to like an art market, I guess. So I think people are definitely, kind of looking at that. But maybe if anything, I hope the financial side of it is just like sort of a trigger that the people, once they realize the technology behind it, it's like, oh, this is awesome. Like, this is really cool. Because I think once you get through the technical jargon, I think the ideas are pretty like sound and easy to understand,
Yeah. Yeah. My friends actually like mentioned crypto to me. That had nothing to do with crypto through you. They're like, oh, is this what you do?
Yeah. I mean, it's again, I still think people are still caught up with this idea of currency as being like the only thing. It's like, oh, well, I don't, is it fake money or whatever? It's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is like so much more than that. Like, yeah. In fact, like I'm kind of annoying about it, but I make a point to, if somebody says currency, I do try to correct people, because like I'm trying to get over this idea of a singular use case, but yeah, no, there's a lot of people getting into NFTs specifically, and I think in my own experience with my token, just onboarding people into this system, like once they have like a MetaMask wallet, and they have a little bit of Ether, and they have these tokens, and now they're able to access these portals and do different things, and that they're like, oh, this is cool. Like there's a lot to this. I think once you get over that first hump, it's like pretty smooth sailing from there.
I like didn't realize that there's kind of a totally different business model like that you mentioned. Like it's more like an art market. Mm-hmm. You can actually like take this music, which is, I guess, royalty based, and change it into like, hey, I painted this.
Yeah. There's only one, Yeah. And it's like, yes, more people can technically access the art, but there is something that's valuable in the ownership of it. And that's not for everybody. Not everybody is in the market for for digital art, but not everybody's in the market for like a sculpture, or something abstract like that. So I don't think it's the answer to everything, but it is a pretty interesting model. I mean, we saw Wu-Tang do that a couple of years ago with Shkreli, and obviously him being involved didn't help the cause, but I think the idea is very interesting. Yeah. We've sort of been ingrained. Again, I'm not really making the argument against this, but we've sort of been ingrained with this concept that music should be widely distributed to the maximum amount of people. And I don't disagree, but I question why we came to that conclusion. It's like, why is that? Shouldn't it be my choice as an artist? Shouldn't I have the choice of like how many prints or copies it should exist? I think NFT conceptually is a way to maybe achieve that. Again, I don't think that that's maybe the model for everything, but it could be a model. If I put a lot of work into a song, maybe I only want 1,000 people to own it. I don't know. Is that interesting? Maybe not. But like I like I have the option to do so. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's kind of like a totally cool idea. Like, it's like, I don't know, part of the metaverse. There's this like Tim Sweeney, if I pronounce his name correctly, like the CEO of Epic, he like had this long podcast on like what it takes to build a metaverse, and one of those things was like we need like digital scarcity and like a way to track items and kind of mint them.
So are we getting blockchain on Fortnite? Is that that'll be the day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that would be cool. Like that would be a fun thing to build.
Yeah, it would be a great introduction. I think I've always felt like gaming to some extent would be a great introduction to this stuff for a large people that are not like typically crypto natives. I mean, even in CS:GO or like other types of games, I mean, it's common to have scarce digital items. This isn't like a foreign concept, it just happens to be all centralized.
Yeah.
So they whatever they want to control that, so you don't get 12-year-olds gambling. But it's a pretty interesting idea.
I mean, I had like an EverQuest character that I sold when
Nice.
when I got to college, which was pretty cool. And like I used to buy, like I played Ultima Online, like that was my game in the 90s, and used to buy gold and stuff. That was like, that felt like a different world. Like you could actually like interact in a different universe for a bit.
I played my game was Anarchy Online. That's the one I played a lot.
Awesome.
But yeah, I kind of missed the whole WoW thing. I think I got out of gaming when WoW came out, and maybe as a good thing because I hear it's highly addictive. But no, I loved that. I loved, like I had like a guild, and like we would go on raids together. We would do all that stuff, and like I feel like I got to know them to some extent, as well as you can. It's like through a digital avatar per se, but my brother also played it a lot, and like we played together, and he would sell his characters like on eBay for like $1,500 for like a character like fully leveled up. It's pretty good for like a kid. And yeah, I don't know, it's just like like again, there's like a whole generation. I mean, if that's my generation, like the new generation's like totally used to this stuff. It's not that foreign of a concept,
Yeah. So those are like weird forms of digital art too. Like,
yeah.
Except that they're owned by like whatever the company that runs them.
But it's this idea of digital ownership. I think it's not that hard to grasp it, and if anything, I feel like putting it on a blockchain of some sort makes it even more kind of tangible. And if you can move it around, yourself, you can see it in your wallet, like that level of ownership. I think people would react pretty positively to that.
Yeah, there's like when Apple like released their like iPhone, they had this like idea of skeuomorphism, where like every interaction had to look like something real, and I think that helped a lot for people to understand that
transition, right?
Yeah. Like my mom asked me about Bitcoin and like setting up a wallet for her, like describing it in those terms. It like helps.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is interesting. And this is maybe a slight tangent, but I've been thinking about this in the context of like the early internet. I mean, you were there, so like I've actually been thinking about this. Like, I feel like the ad model that we've been living under, the Facebook, the Google era, basically, it's been built on this idea that everything on the internet is free. And like, if you think about it, that's the only real place where that happens. Like, anything in real life, is not free. You have to pay for it one way or another. Like, even if it's not direct, it's taxes, like somebody pays for it, So like we've been paying for it through data, whatever mechanism, through our eyeballs or ad space. Like, and I feel like we're kind of moving away from that, or like we're maybe I don't know, I'm not going to make predictions, but like, in many years, we'll sort of just be used to paying for things that we use online. And will sort of have an expectation of quality. Like that feels like maybe a better exchange of some sort. I don't know.
Yeah, I think like that and expectation, I guess, of not of privacy and like, and I almost think that like it's not gonna happen from like a traditional startup that, or like a company like that's doing microtransactions with you. I think it's gonna come out through like governance, like self-organizing, like replacements for Google or whatever. Like this part of decentralization that kind of touches on the edges of like the content that we see and consume, and like especially like user created content. I think this is where governance can kind of turn that whole thing on its head. Like,
yeah, no, it's gonna be really interesting. I think we've seen sort of like waves of it. I mean, we were kind of talking about this like in 2017. That was maybe the first wave. We're going through another one now. I don't know if this will be the end state of it. Obviously, like I think we'll maybe need another wave somewhere down the line where these things really become fully robust to be able to compete with like, you know, a typical hierarchy, right? But I do think that these things scale better, like bigger. You know, if something open source got to the scale of Facebook, I think it would look very different, and it would probably be a lot more user focused. You know,
yeah, I mean, like I think it would have like 10x the value, and what I think is really cool is that like, I don't know, some Altman wrote like that there's like, you know, if you can get like 1,000 fans to pay you $100 or something like that, like if you have that group, just 1,000 people that are making music together, that's not like 1 million people, but that is like awesome. That's yeah, that's like a huge number of artists that are like collaborating, and like the stuff that they would produce would just be ridiculously awesome.
Right, it'd be like super interesting to see, because typically, I mean, maximum a unit of maybe 3 or 4 or 5, 6 people at most writing a song, you know, and not at the same time, you know. It would be really interesting to see like what a song that 1,000 people work on, you know,
or like, just like dumping samples and remixing them and like kind of riffing each other, right? Like I don't know.
It would be interesting creatively. It would be very interesting. It could go the other way though. It could be absolute garbage. So, but I don't know. It would be a very interesting experiment, especially if you start to throw in some like generative AI stuff in there to just spice things up, you know.
I saw this like death metal generated a like YouTube channel.
Nice.
Which I ended up listening for like a good solid hour, because it had like the vocals down too.
Oh wow, that's crazy. That's awesome. I'm super into that kind of thing. I've played around with a little bit of like generative systems, it's not like AI or anything like that, but it's sort of like generating ideas through randomization basically, or if you add enough variation and set it to random, it'll just kind of jump around to different things that'll make sense musically. That was sort of my approach to it, but it's actually pretty surprising like how easily you can get to something that's like passable, you know. It doesn't have like the nuance that a human has yet, but it is pretty interesting. You know, I feel like we're starting to see some of the like GANs and like things like that are starting to challenge a little bit of like what you know, what can be done. But it's also going to be really interesting like when you get when you just think about that as a tool, like if you want to make a painting or something and use like a GAN to draw a painting and it turns it into a landscape, like maybe that's a tool that you used and it was in an intentional way, or maybe you try to break it and that becomes part of the RP. I don't know. Kind of on a tangent, but like that's like I'm not like scared of technology in that sense, you know, of it like hurting art. I think we'll always sort of figure out a way, you know.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, right, it's going to like be driven by humans for the most part.
Right. For now.
although like this is where like I feel like blockchain like is like this idea of like people working for a protocol. Like, I don't know, if there's like a billion events per second happening in some system, you don't know what's going on there, right? Like it's like becomes intractable, and then you're like an ant that's not aware of the anthill, or like what the anthill is computing.
Right. Yeah, but then that's like a whole nother level of governance that you have to like figure out. I mean, we're kind of talking about MakerDAO, and they were one of the first kind of fully baked DAO kind of projects, and for example, like they set their interest rate by vote, and I'm like, that's so slow. That's like, like we're we're off the peg of the DAI. We're off like by like 2% or something like that. It's like this is bad, and they're like, well, we'll submit a vote for it, next our next meeting. Like, we kind of need to fix this now, guys. I think they're like working through all of that, but then we saw iterations of it, like with compounds. We're at this algorithmic, and there's like a couple other ones that are sort of expanding on that are basically building off of each other, and that's the kind of cool side of this. That the composability of it, I think, is like super interesting, of all these projects kind of building off of each other. I mean, like Wirearn, for example, wouldn't exist without all these other ones. Curve and even Curve is sort of built off of Wirearn in a more underlying way. It's super interesting.
Yeah, the way, like the idea of a token as like this container that's kind of moving between these systems with like, they're like kind of different risk engines. Aave Compound, they have like an algorithm that's pricing risk slightly different. I think like this is what probably happens in like the real financial world, just like on paper. And
yeah,
like it's pretty cool that we get like we can actually examine the state, and then people try to snipe that arbitrage, right? Like,
right, with infinite liquidity, right? It's like you better have thought of that obscure random problem. If somebody dumps $100 million into your $3 million pool, what's going to happen? I don't know. It's super interesting. But like, again, just going back to this idea of open source, and I mean, I think that's sort of a theme of like everything we've been talking about, is this idea of building off of infrastructure from other people, and working together as sort of like a mass group of people that are sort of connected loosely by this token or this idea. That's never really been an option up until now, right? Like this is new. We don't know how this is going to play out. Like, for example, one example that was a little bit controversial with what's his name, SBF from or Alameda. Where I think it was Cream Finance, where they listed the the FTT token or something like that, which he had a lot of. So he could deposit his exchange token as collateral, and then short all these other tokens. Which, hey, fair game. That's a fair game, but people are like, actually, I don't know if we like this. Like, but it's like, it's sort of a use case that this enabled that nobody was really thinking of, and or at least at the time, or a lot of people didn't think of. So it's like, but then the governance tried to step in, and like it gets combative, and it's like, but it's interesting because this is all happening just by like in forums on the internet. There is maybe like a team behind it, but for the most part, this is like all happening on Twitter.
Yeah, you're deep into the DeFi, like
the drama. DeFi. Oh, I love it. Yeah. I love it. Not really. I mean, it's like, I find it fascinating. I don't participate in it. I just like I think it's never a dull day in crypto. That's for sure.
I think it's part of I think like it's good for the space most of the time, because like it's us discovering our own bugs versus like somebody regulating them, and like
absolutely yeah. And like that's one thing that I will say is pretty positive about the whole DeFi thing, is like I actually think it was quite insular. it was very much like crypto people, basically leveraged. You're playing with leverage. Let's put it that way. And I'm just glad that it didn't kind of get out of hand, where we got retail coming in and getting into stuff they don't understand, and stuff blowing up, and then we have a whole nother 2017 all over again. So I was kind of happy about that, but that's actually a really good way of putting it, sort of like bug fixing or finding the various, not just code, but sort of governance things and problems. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, these systems are the biggest most incentivized bug bounties in the world, right?
Yeah. What was the one just recently with Harvest Finance? I think that was another one where I think they got away with 25 million. It was an arbitrage thing. It wasn't even a contract bug necessarily. It was maybe something they should have factored in, but yeah, and there's this really interesting practice now, which is this happened twice now, where the hackers will take a bunch of money and then toss a couple million back. They're like, I feel bad. I feel bad taking all this money. So here's a couple million back, and they didn't even drain the entire pool. It was really interesting. It's sort of a pseudo, not fully, maybe a gray hacker.
Yeah, gray hat. Yeah.
Not fully black hat, but I mean, a little bit of a conscious. I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, if you take all of it, it becomes toxic, right? This is kind of the weird part in the space, is that things are fairly traceable, and if you end up trying to use a mixer, you actually may get blocked completely by any legitimate exit point. So it's a weird thing, right? You can't actually steal too much.
Right. Yeah. Well, we saw the KuCoin hacker or whatever. We were just sort of watching this whole thing unfold and realize they're kind of bad at this. They don't I think they were trying to do I think trade some tokens on Uniswap or whatever, and they were just destroying the market. It's just what are you doing? It's feel like they didn't even have a full understanding of it. So it felt I don't know, just kind of an interesting somebody got access to an exchange account or something like that, and drained $150 million. I don't know. It's to your point about the whole ecosystem in general, there are certain parts of it that are definitely toxic. I mean, there's tribalism is certainly a very toxic sort of virus that seems to infect certain people. We've seen it maybe more prominently in Bitcoin, but it definitely happens in Ethereum too. This sort of idea of maximalism, that there's only one blockchain, which is ridiculous if you really sit down and think about it. And I don't know, but the way that I think about these systems is that it's because it's permissionless, or it sort of enables everything. So there's the good and bad, and it's sort of everything at once. And certain things will grow and die, and then other things will learn from that and grow from there. So it's kind of weirdly organic, and I don't know. It's super fascinating. I feel like I keep saying that, but that's the only way I can describe it.
This kind of I think the social kind of phenomenon of maximalism is I think part of this, holding this token and paying for it, and then being early enough for it to grow, and kind of you get defensive, right? This is I built this thing, right?
Right.
For all these people trying to
have a lot invested in it, right?
Yeah.
So it's become a part of your identity as well.
Yeah. Which is, I think, why governance tokens, if somebody can a smaller social network that is user owned through governance is going to be worth 10x as if it was ad driven, because of that. I think in a way we're building weird social networks, right?
Yeah, they are. I've been thinking about that a lot with my own token that I did. It was I called it a community token, but basically the whole idea is it's a social token that's owned by me and people in my community. So, basically like a fan club, essentially. And okay, so like if you take like a token as a mechanism of just combining all these people, and you apply it like to an exchange or the example that I like to give is like people can rally around Uniswap, and Uniswap's amazing, but it's an exchange. It's like there's not much to it. Like you know what I mean. Like culturally speaking, it's pretty cool, but like I think vast majority of people are not that interested in that. So like applying that to something cultural, in my case, or applying it to like something like a social network or something like that, I think is like super interesting, and I could see that definitely kind of expanding quite a bit. Just this like technology aside, just this loose idea of owning a piece of the network that you're in, of owning your own social graph, I think is like super interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think like just the incentives are misaligned with ads. Like folks, there's some company that's like trying to feed you information you don't want, that somebody's paying them to feed you, right? Like that wouldn't happen in like a user-owned network, right? Like
Right.
That's like kind of like like the arbitrage, right? Is for like the stuff that I want versus I don't.
And if they would introduce that, I could very easily be forked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that sort of nature of it of a governance, or just like a wide open governance, I think is like super interesting, because people will like, I think will generally gravitate towards like an equilibrium that works for everybody, that works for the platform creators, that the people that actually work on it, and works for the users as well.
We're like way over time, but I have like 15 more minutes, so we can just keep
let's
going.
Do it.
Like, did you like there's this like the whole sushi swap thing, I think was like kind of like an awesome like story. Like I'm gonna tell that story like I think like 10 years from now. Like
it was quite eventful,
like this kind of like almost like a community. It wasn't like a raid on Uniswap, it was like a raid on the network, right? The social side of it. Like, how do you like go get a bunch of users to like hop over?
you give them a token by basically, like the way that I think about these things is like, okay, especially if we're talking about liquidity incentives or whatever, it's like, even abstracting it from that, is like you have something that people want, and you have something that you want them to do, and you figure out how to merge those two. and what did Sushi Swap want? They wanted liquidity. So how do they have this token that gives them control over this new platform? Well, somebody's going to want that. There'll be some financial value to it. And so it's like they kind of merge both of those worlds. Like in my case, it's like, what do I want? I want people, like my fans, to be more engaged and have a piece of ownership in my community. So like, what am I'm going to actually just give them the token, just because they've already been participating. So like, that was sort of my approach to it. But like, we're seeing like every other model tried out. And I mean, Sushi Swap is super fascinating, especially with like the founder, I guess, kind of like, sold his share, and that was very dramatic. And then, kind of, I mean, I actually think Sushi Swap accelerated the launch of Uniswap of Uni. I think that is pretty clear. I will say the Uniswap token I thought was an amazing launch and super interesting. So I'm glad they did it right. But it was like, it felt a little bit like a reaction to that, because I think they were threatened. I think at one point Sushi Swap had 70% of all LP tokens or something like that. And I mean, I was right there with them, but I was like, I was one of the people that was going to take my liquidity out before it switched, because like I don't want to ride that wave. I didn't want to be a part of that story where it's like, bug in the contract destroys, $1 billion. So which could have happened. but this sort of like vampire mining or whatever, I forget what the term was, but that was like super interesting, right? It's like, how do you bootstrap a community? And what I will say is like SushiSwap, for as much drama as they had early on, they've really sort of developed into their own thing. And like, I think it's maybe not on the level that Uniswap is, but it's very viable. And like, as we move to more sort of DEX aggregators, that type of thing, it'll be I feel like it'll sort of just become a piece of the puzzle, and people will use it if it has better rates, That's how I'm thinking about it.
I think that'll happen with like layer ones as well. Like it's gonna kind of, I think, get a little bit in the background.
That is how I see a lot of this stuff, actually. Like I mean, I think you were talking about Audius. I think Audius is a great example of like abstracting that from the user. And that's not to say that like, I feel like people get into this argument. It's like, oh, this platform is this L1, whatever. Like it's like not. It's like if you're making something that's consumer facing, it's finding the right balance of like basically abstracting that completely from the user, so it's like indistinguishable from Web 2. It still has all the benefits of Web 3 with none of the drawbacks of Web 3, hopefully. And I feel like there's like, if we're talking about consumer grade stuff, there's plenty of room to like sort of hide the plumbing underneath the hood, I guess. And a lot of people get caught up in that and sort of are willing to take a shittier experience, basically.
Like you were a Linux user, right? You were
right. Yeah.
Build Slackware and use like.
Oh, sorry. Now I use Arch, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. Arch just cool.
Yeah. Well, what's the saying is like, how do you spot somebody, or how do you know if somebody uses Arch Linux? Is don't worry, they'll tell you. It's like
This was like, I was a Genti user for like a decade. I was a guru in the forums, and like I had to recompile the kernel once to get something done. I was like, fuck this, and I bought a Mac, and that was it's just like
But that is sort of like I feel like that's sort of the extent of open source up until a point, right? Like. Okay, so like, I mean, if you think about it, Linux is the most widely used operating system on the planet. Like, if you really think about it that way, and that's incredible for something that's free. Like, that's maintained by people. I mean, there's some ways to make money off of it, obviously, but for the most part, people do it for free. So like that's super interesting. But what happens when you add sort of this layer of like financial layer on top of it, or this way to capture the value of it, like baked in on like a protocol level? I feel like that's sort of the unleashing of open source. Where that's, I think, where it can start to rival the Apples of the world. And I mean, Apple sort of benefits from that. Like, I'm a Mac user too. Like, it's a great experience. Like, you can't argue with that. If you're in the walled garden, it's an amazing garden. There's some, until you want to do something that's different. But you know what I mean. Like, I understand why people use it. But I feel like those experiences can exist in the open source world when you unleash them in that way. And that's what I'm hopeful that this stuff will start to do over time.
Yep. And I like, with like, just like music, I think open source is like so hard to monetize. You really need to have be like Linux, or like even the SQLite guys. What widest used database in the world, they make like pennies. Like how do you make money if you just wrote some library that 10,000 people use?
Right. Like, you're creating value, clearly. I mean, it's like, it's so clear, but they're not able to capture that, unfortunately. But within this new model, you could, and like, I think it'll sort of be competed away into a a system that is fair. You know what I mean? Like, because if it's too rent extracting, it'll just sort of be forked away until, you know, I really do think like over time these things will find like a middle ground where it's like you're paying for I keep throwing HTTPS or what, you know, like any kind of an SMTP or like whatever kind of server, an NTP server, sure, whatever you want, like where those services will have like a small transaction fee of some sort, and that'll be normal and sort of baked into whatever thing you're using, you know, and then those people are able to make a living off of building those types of protocols. I mean, that's how I see it. Yeah.
Austin, does it mean our time is up? Because I think I have a live storm thing right after this, like in 5 minutes. So yeah, I can't be in two places. Man, this was super fun.
Yeah, this is great. I love getting in the weeds about this stuff.
We had a few questions come in too. We have 3 minutes left. Let's see if any of these go. I think this might be a good one for you, Andre. Is what do you think about tokenized vinyl records, like physical ownership on chain?
This could prevent counterfeit copies from getting into circulation. It happens tricky if you don't. Yeah, no, I think that could be really interesting. So, what we're really talking about here is like basically tying an NFT directly to a physical product. And I did this one thing recently where it's not a vinyl. I actually am going to do a vinyl. I'm actually doing this, what you're describing. But basically, I released a cassette tape, and it was opened up to trading for like a month or two before, so people could buy and sell the token that was representative of the cassette tape. But then at a later date, you could redeem the cassette tape, which would effectively burn the token and take it out of circulation. So, and then we would mail the tape to you. So it's not like perfectly decentralized or anything like that, but it was a way to sort of tie the token directly on redemption to like a physical product. So it actually became the most expensive cassette tape of all time. So we beat Prince, which is like insane to me. But it's again, this idea of applying markets to limited edition goods and physical products is super interesting. And again, it's about finding the true value of these objects or products that you're making, whether that's like digital music or whether that's vinyl or whether that's a cassette tape, whatever it is. It's really what we're talking about is just like finding the value of it through a market. Hopefully that answers that.
No, that was great. Thank you. Let's see if we can fit any more of these in. This one came from Noah. I was talking to him in the chats. He actually found out about blockchain through Audius dropping audio tokens.
Oh, that's awesome. Nice.
And so I think he had some questions about NFTs. Kind of like
NFT is being able to vote on things with your coin. What's to stop the biggest bidder from controlling every decision, effectively destroying stability? So, for example, like one way that I'm sort of mitigating that with my own token is that it's earned. So, and it's earned in small increments. So we don't really have like a whale problem, you know, even like, and by whale, I mean like somebody with like a huge amount of tokens that could sort of derail governance, I guess. So I think you sort of have to think about that when you're figuring out issuance and if you're thinking about, you know, your token distribution, whatever. I think thinking about ways to get that distribution into the widest amount of people in small increments, I think is a way to sort of mitigate that. And like the NFT stuff as like a voting right, I think is pretty interesting. I mean, I think like maybe it's like like people can always like sort of make more wallets and stuff like that. So I don't know. There's a couple like tricky things to tackle in there, but maybe just enough resistance that it becomes a little bit more fair. So yeah. That's a tricky one.
This was, that was a little more challenging one, but we're glad to have you with us now. This was awesome. We could chat for hours. We should have slotted more time. We never leave enough time for these. So anyone else who wants to follow up with RAC, he's at RAC on Twitter. thank you for taking the time to join us. This is going to be on YouTube, and we'll also be editing this and uploading this to the Solana podcast. So keep an eye out for that. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for your time, Andre. Thanks, Anatoly.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I was going to say, like, if any of the questions, if you want to hit me up on Twitter, I'm happy to jump into them. Thank you for having me, guys. This is fun.
Yeah,
I feel like I never got to talk about this stuff, so I appreciate it. It's great.
Maybe we'll do a round 2. But yeah,
yeah.
Anyone who asked a question that we didn't get to cover it, at RAC on Twitter.
Yeah.
So there we go. Have a good day, everyone.
See you guys. Take care.
See ya.
Bye.